is a terrible abuse of power.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you. Well, we can see now what the GOP has become. It's become the anti-ATF, anti-FBI, anti-law enforcement, pro-insurrection party. Mr. Director, I appreciate your being here. You have one of the toughest jobs in America. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle treat you like you're some kind of a mass shooter instead of someone trying to protect us from the epidemic of gun violence. And I want to recognize all of the volunteers from Moms Demand Action and thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy around the nation. I appreciate how much you're devoted to trying to end this scourge of gun violence. I think like many Americans, that after the tragedy of Sandy Hook, it would finally be enough. Watching those beautiful children massacred would be finally enough to prompt this Congress to do something, to stop this insanity. But it didn't. Tragically, so many members of Congress learned a very different lesson, that they could just wait it out. They could wait out tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and they would have to do nothing. And indeed, on the other side of the aisle, it's just gotten worse. It's just gotten worse. Whenever you see a disparity between what the American people want and what they get, there's usually a powerful special interest at work. And here, the American people desperately want an end to this epidemic. They want common sense gun safety legislation. They want a ban on assault weapons. They want truly universal background checks. It's insane that you can be denied the purchase of a weapon because you're a felon and then go out in the parking lot and buy the same gun. That is insane. And of course, we see the result when we see our children mowed down week after week after week. And it's not like there aren't answers to this. It's not like there aren't things that work. There are things that work, like a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity clips. And yes, it won't stop every shooting, it won't stop every mass shooting, but it'll stop a lot of them, and it'll make the ones that happen far less lethal. I mean, the GOP has become the party of wanting guns with more lethality, capable of killing more people, capable of killing more kids and more cops. And I'm sure they don't actually want cops and kids to die, but it's the effect of their actions, it's the effect of their inaction that people are dying. I mean, not even NRA members want this. And so why do they? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from this absurd, grotesque spectacle of mass shootings week after week and the daily trauma of people getting gunned down? Who benefits? Certainly not the American people. Well, the gun makers benefit. It's all about the money. Apparently, it's all about the money. Nothing else matters. I've been carrying a bill now for 6 or 8 years to repeal the immunity that the gun industry has. Because if it's all about the money, then the only thing that will stop the violence is to take away the money, take away the profit in murder. So I'm grateful to Moms Demand Action. I'm grateful for what you're doing out there. You're making a difference. If not in this building, you're making a difference in state capitals. I think you're going to make a difference in this building. We will get to a tipping point where we will show that we can beat the NRA, we can pass common sense reforms, and we can protect the public. You know, there has been a lot of progress, I think, on the Democratic side of the aisle of members running towards this issue, not away from it. But on the other side of the aisle, after that terrible shooting in Buffalo, for example, a year or two ago, when one of the Republican members said they could no longer in good conscience oppose an assault weapons ban, it was a few days later they were forced to announce that they would not run again because they were told basically that they would be drummed out of the party. And that has got to change. We're just going to see more Americans die from the lack of courage in this building. But I am just so fed up with getting up every day and seeing another city devastated, another town, another school known not for the beauty of its people, but for the deadliness of another tragedy. We've got to do better than this. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Dettelbach, are you troubled by the rule? I mean, you told him one thing 10 years ago, and now you're directly contradicting that.
The stabilizing brace short barrel rifle rule, I assume, is the rule you're referring to.
I'm referring to the letter that was sent back on November 26, 2012, that Mr. Nell's referenced in his first line of questioning, where
Sure.
you told the FTB finds that the submitted brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert the weapon and would not alter its classification. Now you're doing just the opposite.
We have been public and in the rulemaking itself have detailed that history, and there were inconsistencies. However, there was also a situation, Mr. Chairman, where people were marketing products that had never been presented to ATF, saying that they were ATF
Was that the only time you
approved.
told them? The only time you told the American people that it was okay?
No, we look at specific
Let me read
products that are
Let me read this letter, March 5th, 2014, because this doesn't so much focus on the brace, focus on how the weapon's used. And we have determined that firing a pistol from the shoulder would not cause the pistol to be reclassified as a short-barreled rifle. We do not classify weapons based on how individuals use the weapon. So you told them not once, but twice that it was okay. And I'm just asking, does it bother you now that you're making the change that's going to impact millions of Americans?
The rule was necessary in part because it needed to address inconsistency so that people could understand the definition of a
I
short
just read two letters that were consistent. Both of them said it was fine.
There were other letters that were not.
Has the ATF ever found itself in this position where a rule change directly contradicts what you've told American citizens was okay, and that's going to impact millions of law-abiding citizens? Have you ever found yourself in that situation?
Respectfully, I don't believe that's I agree
Millions
with that
of Americans
summary
aren't-
of where we are.
millions of Americans aren't going to be impacted?
There were specific products that get presented for classification. Those products then sometimes change. They're not the same ones that are marketed. And there was inconsistency. The market is dynamic. It was necessary to do what notice and comment rulemaking, I think, is a better way to do that.
I think millions of Americans think the inconsistency is with the ATF because you told them one thing and now you're changing. What happens on May 31st?
According to the rule.
No, what happens on May 31st?
According to the rule, people have, from the date the rule was published until that date, to do one of several things. They can either detach the brace from the firearm and keep both, and they can attach that brace to another one.
They got to remove or destroy the brace, get a longer barrel, turn in or destroy the firearm, or register the firearm. Is that right? They got to do one of those four things.
They have to apply to register. Whether or not the application is ruled on, they're allowed to keep the item during that entire time so that they're not held accountable for any
If they don't do that
period.
and the timeline runs out, what happens to those individuals? They don't do those four things and the timeline is expired. What happens then?
I assume that people who are aware.
No, I'm not asking. What happens if they don't do those four things?
I think that, Mr. Chairman, as a prosecutor, I just want to be accurate. What happens, former prosecutor, what happens is, depending on the circumstance, if a person is unaware, right, they're not going to be prosecuted for things that they're unaware of.
Let's cut to the chase. They could be a felon, right?
Well,
they could be a felon.
It depends on the facts and circumstances of each case. And of course, we would prioritize enforcement on gang members who are having these items and shooting
You mentioned
people.
enforcement. How are you going to enforce this?
With
You're going to go to gun ranges?
What we will do is
You're going to go to manufacturers and look at the risk of people they sold braces to?
What we will do is when we do a search warrant in a drug case and we discover an unlawful item, whether it's a machine gun or a Glock switch or a short-barreled rifle that doesn't comply, we will consider that as one of the charges. There's no plan.
Does the Gun Control Act or the National Firearms Act clearly and unambiguously prohibit pistol braces?
It doesn't prohibit anything. It calls for increased controls on short-barreled rifles.
Not the gun control, but I'm just reading from the court decision yesterday in the Sixth Circuit where the judge said the statute does not clearly and unambiguously prohibit bump stocks, The court went on to say, for a decade, the ATF has maintained that a bump stock is not a machine gun part, and the court said the ATF's own flip-flop on this position is one of the reasons why they ruled in favor of those opposing the rule you guys made. Seems to me we're in the same situation here. And yesterday, the Sixth Circuit gave us a strong ruling on the bump stock issue. I would anticipate that we're going to get other strong rulings on this issue as well. With that, the chair recognizes the gentlelady from Washington.